Welcome to the AI Unraveled Weekend Special, your Saturday briefing on technology, science, and the human friction of the digital age. It is Saturday, April 11th, 2026. I'm your host, Etienne Newman, broadcasting from Calgary. Before we dive in, a quick reminder. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to subscribe to AI Unraveled directly on Apple Podcasts so you can enjoy this weekend human interest briefing and all our daily episodes completely ads-free. Today's episode is brought to you by Jamgamind. When the internet is flooded with deepfakes and tech monopolies are putting betting odds next to real journalism, objective truth is your most valuable asset. Jamgamind provides the human-verified, technical-grade analysis you need to see through the algorithmic noise and protect your own critical thinking. Visit jamgamind.com. Today we are unpacking the anxiety of progress. We will celebrate the human triumph of the Artemis 2 moon mission while simultaneously deconstructing the boiling anger aimed at AI executives. We will look at why France is ditching Microsoft Windows to reclaim its digital sovereignty, how crying in an argument actually damages both people's reputations, and why DeepMind solving complex math is the only AI news you actually need to care about today. Let's unravel the human condition.
10 days ago, 4 human beings literally strapped themselves to the top of a controlled explosion.
Yeah.
And they hurtled hundreds of thousands of miles through the freezing vacuum of space. And then they slammed back into Earth's atmosphere at like 24,000 miles an hour.
Which is just, it's hard to even wrap your head around.
Right. But they survived. It was this massive triumph of physics. And yet, the thing that caused a literal emergency-level global financial panic this week wasn't that fiery space capsule.
No, not at all.
It was an invisible string of code just sitting on a quiet server rack in San Francisco.
It's the defining paradox of our era, really. We are looking out at the cosmos with this breathtaking, unified ambition. But simultaneously, we're kind of tearing ourselves apart down here.
Yeah, totally.
We are just completely terrified of the algorithms we are building in our own labs.
Well, welcome to your weekend intelligence briefing for April 11th, 2026. If you're joining us for this deep dive, you know the drill. We take this massive stack of sources.
And it is a huge stack this week.
Oh, it's overflowing. The articles cluttering your feeds, the research papers you saved. But let's be honest, haven't read yet, the geopolitical bulletins. We find the actual signal in all that noise. Today, the stack is incredibly diverse. We're looking at official NASA mission debriefs, confidential tech security memos, banking crisis reports, and a really fascinating batch of brand new behavioral psychology studies.
Which are wild, by the way.
They really are.
No.
And we are filtering every single piece of this through one specific narrative lens, which is the anxiety of progress.
Which honestly is the only way to genuinely understand the whiplash of this week's news. When you lay all these events out side by side, you see a species capable of unparalleled, almost magical scientific coordination, right?
Well,
But then we are completely paralyzed by this boiling, visceral, digital paranoia.
it's like the physical world is giving us hope, while
Yeah.
the digital world is driving us to sabotage.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So let's start with the hope, because frankly, we need an anchor before we dive into the chaos. The Artemis' second mission, the splashdown, just happened today in the Pacific Ocean. 4 astronauts, riding inside the Orion capsule, completed the first crewed trip around the moon since 1972.
It's historic.
And the metrics on this are just staggering. A 10-day mission, they traveled, 694,481 miles.
Wow.
They swung more than 4,000 miles past the far side of the moon. And crucially, Christina Koch made history as the first woman to ever venture beyond Earth's orbit.
From an engineering standpoint, Artemis II is a masterclass in extreme stress management.
Yeah.
But to really understand why this mission feels psychologically different to us than, say, a new AI release, we have to look at the mechanics of that return journey, specifically the re-entry phase.
Okay, lay it on us.
Well, the Orion capsule hit the Earth's atmosphere at 24,661 miles per hour.
Okay, hold on. Let's unpack that speed for a second. 24,000 miles an hour. That is roughly Mach 32.
Right.
At that velocity, the air in front of the capsule doesn't just casually move out of the way, it violently compresses.
It compresses so intensely that the gas molecules literally break apart into plasma.
Which is terrifying.
It is. It generates temperatures nearly half as hot as the surface of the sun right outside the window of the spacecraft. Now, NASA had a massive problem leading up to this.
Yeah, from the first test, right?
Exactly. During the Artemis ion crewed test flight a few years ago, the heat shield, which is an ablative shield designed to literally burn away to carry the heat off the capsule, it showed significantly more charring and structural loss than any of their computer models predicted.
So their predictive models were just wrong.
Yeah.
The AI and the physics engines they used to simulate the first flight just missed a variable.
They completely missed how the specific material would behave during a really complex maneuver called a skip entry.
A skip entry.
Right. That's where the capsule dips into the atmosphere, bounces back up slightly to bleed off some speed, and then plunges back down.
Kind of like skipping a stone on a pond.
Perfectly said. So how did NASA fix it for Artemis II? They didn't throw out the physics playbook. They just recalculated the aerodynamic trajectory.
Right.
They adjusted the angle of attack. They utilized the immutable laws of Newtonian physics to solve a highly visible, tangible problem. And today, that heat shield held. It protected 4 human lives.
So here is what I'm trying to figure out. Why does an event like that, where humans are literally dropped into a 5,000-degree fireball at Mach 32, why does that feel fundamentally less terrifying to the general public than a tech company announcing a new language model?
It's a great question.
Because conquering the lethal vacuum of space somehow feels safe to us, it unites us. But conquering the digital space inside our laptops is causing mass panic. Why?
I think it's because space exploration, for all its immense danger, is deterministic.
Deterministic. Okay, explain that.
It means it is governed by gravity, thrust, and thermodynamics. When the heat shield shars unexpectedly, you can reverse engineer the math. You can find the specific friction variable you miss.
So if it's a known unknown.
Exactly. It's a physical manifestation of human ingenuity working against an external natural force. Space is the adversary, and humanity is united in surviving it.
Wow. Okay, and the digital progress we are seeing right now is the exact opposite of deterministic.
Precisely. We are deploying massive neural networks with, billions of parameters. We don't actually know the precise mathematical pathway the model takes to arrive at a conclusion.
It's just a black box.
It is a total black box. And more importantly, the adversary isn't the harshness of the lunar orbit. The adversary is perceived to be the technology itself. And the economic system that's deploying it, it threatens our utility.
Which brings us to the driveway in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Because while millions of people were watching the NASA live stream, feeling this swelling pride in human achievement, the psychological fracture down here on the ground was manifesting in literal violence. Let's dig into the Sam Altman attack.
It is a profound, almost tragic juxtaposition.
It really is.
Yeah.
So at exactly 4:16 a.m. Pacific time this week, police responded to a fire investigation in the North Beach neighborhood.
Right.
A 20-year-old man had thrown a Molotov cocktail at the exterior gate of the home belonging to OpenAI CEO Sam Altman. The individual was arrested and subsequently made explicit, documented threats to burn down OpenAI's headquarters.
Yeah, that's intense.
Nobody was hurt, the fire was contained, but we have to pause here. A Molotov cocktail.
What's really fascinating here is the sheer asymmetrical nature of the act.
What do you mean by asymmetrical?
Well, you have a 20-year-old, a member of the very first generation, to grow up entirely immersed in the digital algorithmic age, resorting to one of the most primitive analog weapons in human history.
Right, fire inside a glass bottle.
Exactly, used against the architect of the most sophisticated digital intelligence on Earth.
I want to push back on the methodology, though.
Go for it.
Why attack the physical house? Why a firebomb? If you are a digitally native 20-year-old who is angry at an AI company, wouldn't the modern response be to attempt a cyber attack?
You would think so, yeah.
Like doxing, swatting, trying to breach their servers. Why resort to a tactic from like a 19th century labor riot?
Because you simply cannot hack an entity that vastly outpaces your computational resources.
Oh, that makes sense.
This individual likely knows they cannot penetrate OpenAI's security infrastructure. So the anxiety seeks the lowest barrier to physical friction.
Right.
When progress is entirely invisible and abstract, just code running in data centers miles away, human panic demands a tangible target. The CEO's front gate becomes the physical proxy for the invisible algorithm that this person believes is destroying their future.
And it isn't just one isolated incident of violence. That same visceral anxiety is bleeding directly into the corporate workforce.
Absolutely.
Our sources detail widespread reports this week of Gen Z workers intentionally sabotaging their own company's AI rollouts. They are actively trying to break the productivity tools their employers are forcing them to use.
We really need to contextualize that sabotage with the macroeconomic data provided in the stack, though.
Okay, bring in the macro.
Look at GoPro. They just announced they're laying off 145 workers, which is nearly a quarter of their entire global workforce.
A quarter. That's huge.
Right. So when young employees read headlines about massive structural tech layoffs happening weekly, the threat of AI automation stops being a theoretical debate about the future of work.
It becomes real.
It becomes an immediate existential threat to their rent and their groceries.
But wait, how do you even sabotage an AI rollout? If a company mandates an enterprise AI tool, aren't the workers just hurting their own performance metrics by refusing to use it?
Well, they aren't just refusing to use it, they are weaponizing compliance.
Weaponizing compliance. I love that phrase.
Yeah, sabotage in this context means intentionally feeding the internal models ambiguous prompts, or refusing to correct AI hallucinations so the output remains flawed.
Wow.
Or even over-reporting minor bugs to the IT department just to stall the deployment. It is a deliberate introduction of friction.
It is essentially the digital equivalent of throwing a wooden shoe into the textile loom, the original Luddites.
It's exactly the same psychological mechanism. It's an act of desperate self-preservation.
Yeah.
When you feel you have absolutely no agency over the macro-level rollout of a new technology, you exert agency in the micro-level environment you can control, even if it ultimately harms your own long-term career prospects.
It's like the heat shield on the Orion capsule. The astronauts had a carefully engineered ablative layer to protect them from the friction of re-entry.
Right.
Society has absolutely zero psychological heat shield against the friction of this AI integration. We are just burning up on re-entry.
That's a great analogy.
And this panic isn't just happening at the entry level of the workforce. It goes straight to the highest echelons of global finance.
Let's talk about Anthropic's new Mythos model and that emergency meeting in Washington.
This is where the anxiety transitions from theoretical job loss to systemic infrastructural collapse.
It's a huge leap.
Anthropic's new release didn't just impress technologists this week, it genuinely terrified the financial sector. Terrified is putting it lightly. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell called an emergency meeting.
Yeah, they did.
And they didn't just call regulators, they brought in the heavyweights, the CEOs of Citigroup, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, Wells Fargo, and Goldman Sachs. They all rushed to Washington.
Which is unprecedented.
So let me ask you this. Because these banking CEOs deal with highly complex, quantitative algorithmic trading every single day, Wall Street runs on AI and complex math, why is Mythos specifically causing them to freak out?
Because Mythos represents a leap from generative outputs to agentic reasoning, specifically regarding legacy code.
Legacy codes, like the old stuff.
Exactly. Much of the global banking system still runs on decades-old mainframes, utilizing languages like COBOL.
Right, COBOL.
These systems are stable, sure, but they are incredibly brittle if they are fundamentally breached. And the intelligence brief suggests Mythos possesses this unprecedented ability to not just write code, but to autonomously map network architectures.
Wait, on its own?
Yes, autonomously. It can identify zero-day vulnerabilities in these legacy mainframes and execute lateral movement within a system.
So it's not just a chatbot. It's an autonomous recursive penetration tester that is actually smarter than the security patches.
Precisely. The fear discussed in Washington wasn't about an AI writing a bad email. It was the fear of AI-driven cyber attacks autonomously navigating a bank's internal network and literally wiping out account balances.
That is a nightmare scenario.
Erasing the digital ledgers that represent human life savings.
And Anthropic's proposed solution to this massive systemic vulnerability they just brought into the world, their plan is to limit the exposure of the Mythos model by exclusively offering it to, quote, a few dozen companies.
Which has triggered a massive and frankly justified backlash.
Yeah. I would think so.
The specific critique outlined in our security bulletins is that AI labs are now profiting by selling the solutions to the very threats their own models engineered.
It's an incredible racket. I mean, it is the equivalent of a chemical company inventing a highly volatile airborne toxin, releasing it into the wind, and then saying to the government, hey, don't panic, we've also invented the only gas mask that filters it.
Right.
And we're going to license it to 50 exclusive enterprise clients.
It establishes an incredibly dangerous incentive structure, and state-level authorities are no longer keeping quiet about it either.
No, they are not.
The Bank of England released a statement this week raising a massive alarm over this exact dynamic. They explicitly stated that some AI models currently in development are simply, quote, too dangerous to release.
Too dangerous to release.
Yeah. When a central bank, which is historically conservative and very measured in its language, uses the phrase too dangerous to release regarding commercial software, we have crossed a fundamental threshold.
So if we look at the board right now, we have entry-level workers actively breaking their own software out of fear. We have analog firebombs being thrown at tech executives.
Right.
And we have the global financial system terrified of having its underlying ledgers erased by an autonomous agent. It sounds completely dystopian and honestly irrational.
But it's not.
No, here's where it gets really interesting. This anxiety is not irrational at all. It is entirely justified by the massive, confusing divergence in how these algorithms are being deployed. Right now, the AI industry is splitting down two completely opposed paths.
A total divergence.
One is a quest for profound, species-altering scientific truth. The other is just cheap, gamified engagement farming.
The duality of application.
Yeah.
If we want to understand what AI looks like when it isn't terrifying central bankers, we really have to look at what DeepMind and Google accomplished this week. With very little fanfare, they have been quietly solving previously unsolved Erda's number theory problems.
Okay, I'm going to need you to explain Erda's number theory to me like I am a curious high schooler.
I can do that.
Who is Erda's? What are these problems? And why does solving them matter to anyone outside of a university math department?
Okay, so Paul Erdős was one of the most prolific mathematicians of the 20th century. He posed hundreds of problems, largely in a field called combinatorics.
Combinatorics.
Think of combinatorics as the mathematics of counting, arranging, and finding absolute order within massive, chaotic systems. An Erdős problem might ask something like, how large does a network of connections need to be before a specific, highly organized pattern is mathematically guaranteed to emerge within it?
So it's about finding guaranteed structure inside chaos.
Exactly. And the reason these problems have remained unsolved for decades is what we call the combinatorial explosion.
Which means what, exactly?
The number of possibilities grows so unfathomably large that human brains simply cannot hold all the variables. And even traditional supercomputers cannot brute force the calculations before the heat death of the universe.
But DeepMind did it.
DeepMind did it.
Yeah.
But here's the critical part. It didn't just calculate faster.
Okay.
Terence Tao, who is widely considered one of the greatest living mathematicians, he reviewed one of the AI's solutions.
And what did he say?
He pointed out that the AI-generated argument was actually, quote, relatively straightforward. It found an elegant, deductive logical path that human experts who had spent years writing massive, unresolved research papers on this exact problem, they had completely overlooked it.
So the AI didn't just use a bigger bulldozer. It found a hidden door.
That's a perfect way to put it.
I was trying to visualize this. It is basically like watching a group of brilliant, world-class architects construct this incredibly complex, thorny maze. They've been lost inside it for 40 years. They're drawing intricate maps, arguing over dead ends, publishing entire academic journals about the structure of the walls.
Right.
And then an AI tourist casually walks into the maze, turns left, takes 2 rights, and walks straight out the exit in 5 minutes.
It is a profound humbling of human cognition.
It really is.
But to answer your earlier question, why does this matter to the average person?
Yeah, why should we care?
Because this level of pure mathematics is the root architecture of physical reality. If humanity is going to achieve commercial fusion energy, or design room temperature superconductors, or map complex genomic pathways to cure diseases, we cannot rely on trial and error in a lab anymore.
We need the math.
We have to use advanced combinatorics and number theory to model the physical world. Math is the bottleneck to a post-scarcity future. Solving Erdős problems is how you crack the universe's source code.
And yet, as our intelligence report points out, this tier of application is incredibly rare. Only OpenAI and DeepMind are currently throwing massive compute resources at this fundamental, high-tier scientific problem-solving.
Which brings us to the second path, and the industry critique outlined in our sources is brutal.
It is scathing.
While the top-tier labs are unlocking the math required for fusion energy, the second-tier labs are focused entirely on what the report calls, quote, insipid job displacement, hacking, and engagement farming. Meta's new Muse Spark model, for example, it just ranked 4th in the Artificial Analysis Index, but its primary applications seem focused on generating synthetic content for social feeds rather than scientific discovery.
There is a growing argument in the tech community that these second-tier data centers should literally be throttled or banned by regulators until they start investing their compute into real scientific advancement.
Yeah, you hear that a lot now.
Because when you look at how these models are warping our daily reality, it is infuriating. If DeepMind solving math problems is the nobility of AI, what happened to Google News this week is the absolute gutter. It is the gamification of our shared reality.
You're talking about the polymarket integration.
Yes, exactly. Google had to issue a statement this week claiming that polymarket betting odds appearing directly inside Google News results was an error.
An error, sure.
Yeah, right. Not an intentional feature, just a slip of the algorithm.
Let's explain polymarket for the listener. Polymarket is essentially a decentralized prediction market. It's a crypto casino where people place real money bets on real-world events. Right.
Will a specific politician win? Will a certain country launch a missile? Will a CEO be indicted?
Right. And Google already partners with Polymarket and a similar site called Kalshi to display those betting odds inside Google Finance. Which, fine.
Yeah, finance makes sense.
If you are looking at financial instruments and risk, a prediction market makes a twisted sort of sense. But they couldn't explain how the API bled over into the global news feed.
Which is deeply problematic.
So before they pulled it down, you would open Google News to read about a serious, life-altering geopolitical event. You'd see a credible, heavily researched piece of journalism from Reuters or The Guardian.
Okay.
And sitting right next to the headline, injected by Google's algorithm, were live betting odds leading you directly to a crypto casino to place a wager on the tragedy.
The erosion of context is staggering here. It flattens the human experience.
Completely flattens it. A geopolitical crisis that impacts millions of lives is given the exact same algorithmic weight as a sports score. It conditions the public to view global events not as realities requiring empathy or action, but as content to be speculated on for profit.
And when search monopolies try to turn global news into a literal casino by injecting betting odds next to journalism, you need an anchor to reality. GemGamind provides human-verified, technical-grade analysis for the individual navigating this collapse of digital trust. Visit djamgamind.com, pronounced Jamgamind.
It is so essential to have that verified filter, especially when you consider the sheer physical cost of running these dual realities.
Yes, the resource extraction. Yes, the part that connects the digital back to the physical. We talked about DeepMind's brilliant breakthroughs. There was also a related engineering breakthrough this week that cuts AI energy use by 100 times while actually boosting accuracy.
Let's pause on the mechanism of that, because a 100x reduction defies current semiconductor scaling.
How so?
Well, they aren't just building a slightly better silicon chip. They are exploring architectures like sparse mixture of experts, where the model only activates a tiny, hyper-specialized fraction of its neural network for any given query.
Leaving the rest dormant.
Right, leaving the rest dormant. Or they are moving toward analog optical computing, using light instead of electricity to process matrix multiplications, which generates practically zero heat.
It is brilliant engineering. But contrast that theoretical efficiency with the stark physical reality currently playing out on the ground.
It's grim.
Amazon, Microsoft, and Google are under massive, coordinated pressure from their own investors this week to disclose the exact site-specific water and power consumption of their massive data centers.
Because investors are finally realizing that the physical footprint of the cloud is completely unsustainable.
Yeah.
These data centers require millions of gallons of local municipal water just for cooling the server racks. They are drawing so much power, they are forcing utility companies to delay retiring old coal plants.
So it forces the ultimate question of resource allocation. Is the massive, devastating drain on our physical electrical grid and our local water supplies worth it if that computing power is just being routed to inject cryptocurrency betting markets next to news articles?
Probably not.
Are we draining aquifers to power a casino while telling ourselves we're building the future?
It is a profound misallocation of resources. And it is exactly this dynamic, the collapse in digital trust, the gamification of serious platforms, and the extraction of sovereign physical resources by private corporations that is driving the next massive trend in our briefing.
Which is?
The pushback is no longer just individual anxiety or a 20-year-old acting out. It is moving to state-level action. Sovereign nations are demanding their autonomy back.
Which brings us across the Atlantic to France.
Right.
The French government made an incredibly aggressive structural move this week. They announced a comprehensive plan to rip out Microsoft Windows from all of their government administrative computers and replace it with the open-source operating system, Linux.
We have to pay very close attention to the phrasing used by the French minister David Emile here.
What did he say?
He stated publicly that the French government can no longer accept having zero control over its data and digital infrastructure. He explicitly framed the shift to Linux as a necessary effort to, quote, regain control of our digital destiny.
Digital destiny.
Yes, he is invoking the concept of digital sovereignty.
Digital sovereignty. It sounds like a think tank buzzword, but the actual on-the-ground implications are massive. Let's break down why a country cares so much about an operating system. What does Windows do that Linux doesn't, or vice versa, that threatens a nation's destiny?
It comes down to telemetry and code auditing.
Okay, telemetry.
Windows is a proprietary closed-source system. It constantly phones home to Microsoft servers, sending telemetry data, error reports, usage statistics, hardware configurations.
Constantly streaming back.
Right. So a foreign government using Windows has to simply trust Microsoft's promise that this data isn't being harvested for intelligence or commercial exploitation.
Which is a big ask.
It is. Furthermore, because the kernel is closed source, French cybersecurity agencies cannot independently audit the millions of lines of code to ensure there are no backdoors inserted by foreign intelligence services.
But Linux is open source.
Exactly. With Linux, the French government can take the operating system, compile it themselves, read every single line of code, strip out any telemetry they don't want, and run it entirely on internal air-gapped servers.
So no data ever leaves Paris.
None.
So this is basically the macro version of the Gen Z worker sabotaging their AI tools. No sovereign nation on Earth wants its entire digital nervous system, its tax records, its military logistics, its diplomatic cables managed by a foreign for-profit corporation.
Especially not a corporation based in a country that could change its export laws or geopolitical stance based on a single election.
That is a very good point. Listen, the internet is officially overflowing with AI hustle bros selling you useless 10-page prompt PDFs that don't actually do anything. Stop wasting your time. Etienne has done the actual forensic vetting for the AI Unraveled community. Head over to djamsjmine.com/toolkit for the AI Executive Toolkit. It's a curated, professional-grade stack featuring tools like Chatbase, 11 Labs, and ARA, complete with exclusive listener perks so you can actually upgrade your workflow without the fluff. Because just like France, you need tools you can actually trust and control in your own workspace.
And Microsoft is acutely aware of this eroding trust. They are feeling the geopolitical heat right now, and they are scrambling to patch the leaks.
Let's look at Microsoft's reaction. Our sources show they are completely overhauling the Windows Insider program in what they claim is a massive effort to improve software quality and security.
They're making big changes there.
Yeah, they are fragmenting the testing channels. The Canary and Dev channels are being merged into a single experimental channel. The beta channel is staying mostly the same for stable previews. And testers can now choose between ARM-focused builds, standard builds, and a new future platforms option.
It's a lot of shuffling.
Let me push back on Microsoft's strategy here, though. Is this actually addressing the problem? How does splitting up beta testing channels win back the trust of the French government?
It doesn't, not even a little bit.
Really?
It is a technical band-aid applied to a geopolitical fracture. Giving beta testers more granular control over which experimental build they run might result in slightly fewer system crashes in the final commercial release.
Sure.
But it does absolutely nothing to address France's core philosophical concern, which is who owns the infrastructure.
Right.
A less buggy version of a closed-source operating system still sends telemetry data to Redmond, Washington. Microsoft is trying to solve a crisis of sovereignty with a software patch.
It's basically rearranging the deck chairs on a ship that the passengers are actively trying to disembark.
Perfect analogy.
But the duality of how states view this technology is just staggering. Because on one hand, you have France rejecting foreign tech ecosystem to protect their internal sovereignty. But on the exact same weekend, Our intelligence bulletins reveal that the CIA is enthusiastically, aggressively embracing generative AI.
Yeah, the CIA plans to deploy AI coworkers to actively assist human spies in the field.
How does an AI coworker function for a spy? We aren't talking about drafting emails here, right?
No, we are talking about massive data synthesis.
Okay.
A human intelligence officer in a foreign capital might be trying to track the movement of illicit funds or illicit materials. The AI coworker can ingest satellite imagery, open source local news, intercepted communications, and financial ledgers simultaneously.
All at once.
All at once, finding the hidden combinatorial patterns, much like the Urdu's math problem we talked about, that point to a specific asset or threat.
It perfectly encapsulates the hypocrisy, or perhaps just the pragmatic duality, of the state. They are terrified of AI infrastructure when it threatens their internal data privacy, but they are incredibly eager to weaponize its analytical capabilities abroad.
AI is simultaneously the ultimate vulnerability and the ultimate weapon.
So we have explored the geopolitical chess moves. We've dissected the corporate panic at the banks and the physical constraints of our power grids. But to truly synthesize this intelligence briefing, we have to look inward. We have to examine the underlying thread connecting all of this: human psychology.
It all comes back to that.
How is the human brain actually processing these conflicting realities? How do we function in a world where the glowing rectangle in our pocket is both the tool that might solve fusion energy and the tool that might autonomously wipe out our bank accounts while injecting betting odds into our news feeds?
The psychological burden is immense, and the behavioral science studies included in this week's report give us the exact academic vocabulary to understand how we cope. Specifically, we really need to look at the study on cognitive dissonance.
Let's unpack this study, and I want to give a very strict caveat to you listening right now. We are looking at this purely through the lens of behavioral science mechanisms.
Yes, absolutely.
We are taking absolutely no political science here. We are simply reporting the findings of these scientists as a high-profile, documented example of a universal human flaw.
Agreed?
The study specifically examined why supporters of Donald Trump remain loyal to him despite learning about allegations of sexual misconduct and illegal activities.
The researchers identified the core mechanism as cognitive dissonance.
Which is?
In psychological terms, cognitive dissonance isn't just confusion. It is the severe, measurable mental discomfort a person experiences when they hold two fundamentally contradictory beliefs, or when their current behavior directly conflicts with their stated moral values.
And the brain interprets this dissonance as actual pain.
Yes, physical, measurable pain.
And to relieve that pain, the brain doesn't usually change its behavior, right? It changes its reality.
Exactly. The human brain will perform Olympic-level mental gymnastics. It will justify, minimize, or invent entirely new rationalizations to ensure continued allegiance to the original belief.
I think that's easier.
Much easier. It is psychologically easier to warp your perception of reality than to admit that your foundational identity or past behavior was fundamentally wrong.
So let's take that exact mechanism, the neurological friction of justifying loyalty when presented with deeply negative facts and extrapolated entirely away from politics and into the tech world.
It fits
It
perfectly.
explains absolutely everything about our relationship with these AI monopolies right now.
We are a society trapped in profound cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, we are.
I mean, how do we justify our continued daily loyalty to these massive tech ecosystems? We know, factually, that they harvest our personal data and train models on our private lives.
Right.
We know, factually, that their data centers are draining local aquifers. We know they are building autonomous agents that actively threaten our economic livelihoods. And yet, what do?
We upgrade our phones. We pay the $20 a month subscription fee for the premium language model. We integrate it directly into our workflows.
Because to stop using them would require us to completely upend our modern lives. It would require us to disconnect from the economy and, more painfully, to admit that we have been actively, willingly participating in a system that is harming us.
And that dissonance is just too painful.
So we rationalize. We tell ourselves, well, the AI makes me more productive, or if I don't use it, I'll fall behind, or Google will fix the energy problem eventually. We are trapped in a cycle of loyalty driven by the exact same psychological discomfort identified in that political study.
And when that internal psychological discomfort boils over into actual external conflict, behavioral science dictates very specific outcomes. There is another study in the report focusing on interpersonal conflict that I think perfectly explains the bizarre behaviors we discussed earlier.
You're referring to the study on reputational trade-offs during conflict.
Yes, exactly. The study examined how people behave during intense arguments. It found that staying calm and methodical protects your own social reputation.
Makes sense.
But, and here's the wild part, if you cry or exhibit extreme emotional distress, it actually damages the reputation of your opponent alongside your own.
It is an asymmetrical social strategy.
How does that work?
You are basically making a subconscious trade-off. You sacrifice your own standing. You allow yourself to look emotionally unstable, weak, or irrational, specifically to ensure the other person looks cruel, unreasonable, or oppressive to the rest of the group.
Let's apply that to the anxiety of progress we've been talking about.
Okay.
The 20-year-old throwing the firebomb at Sam Altman's house. The Gen Z workers intentionally sabotaging their own careers by breaking the AI tools.
Right.
They aren't trying to win a logical debate.
No, they're not.
They are weaponizing their perceived weakness. They're creating asymmetrical friction.
In a societal sense, they are throwing a destructive tantrum. They know they cannot outcode OpenAI. They know they cannot outcompete a multi-billion-dollar enterprise rollout.
Right.
So they resort to creating a spectacle.
They are successfully making the tech companies look bad. They're generating global headlines about panic, resistance, and the dystopian nature of AI. But they're completely ruining their own lives, risking prison time, and destroying their own careers in the process.
Inflicting reputational damage on the system has become more important to them than their own survival.
And on the complete opposite end of the behavioral spectrum, you have the French government.
Right.
France methodically ripping out Windows and switching to Linux is the calm approach to conflict. They identified a massive existential threat, the loss of digital sovereignty to foreign tech monopolies. But they didn't throw a geopolitical firebomb. They didn't ban the internet.
No, they executed a structural, architectural change. They protected their national reputation, they secured their infrastructure, and they resolved the conflict while maintaining absolute control.
It is a masterclass in contrasting responses to the exact same underlying anxiety.
Right.
But it leaves the lingering question for you, the individual listener.
Yeah.
When you are caught in the middle of this, between the Molotov cocktails on the street, the central bankers panicking in Washington, and the geopolitical software shifts in Europe, how do you stay grounded? How do you maintain your sanity when the digital world is fracturing?
The intelligence briefing actually included one final piece of research, a lifestyle note that seems totally out of place in a tech debrief, but psychologically it might be the most important piece of the puzzle.
The Mediterranean diet study. It serves as the psychological anchor for everything we've discussed today.
It really does.
A comprehensive new study found that switching to a vegan Mediterranean diet significantly reduced negative environmental impacts across the board. The numbers are massive.
Let's hear them.
A 54.5% reduction in negative impacts on human health, a 50.9% reduction in ecosystem damage, a 43.4% reduction in physical resource use compared to a traditional diet. And crucially, it cut retail food costs for the individual by 16.3%.
We really need to frame this not as dietary advice, but as a micro-example of regaining personal autonomy.
How so?
When the digital world feels entirely overwhelming, when you are reading bulletins about AI models that are too dangerous to release, or tech monopolies turning the news into a casino, the human brain desperately needs an area of absolute, uncontested control.
It is a grounding technique. You might not be able to stop Anthropic from deploying an autonomous banking agent. You might not be able to audit the source code of your operating system, but you have absolute sovereignty over what you put on your plate.
Exactly. Taking control of your physical health, curating your immediate environment, and intentionally lowering your personal resource consumption is a proven psychological defense against existential dread.
It's something you can touch.
It is a daily, physical, undeniable reminder that you still possess agency in a world that feels completely automated.
It brings us all the way back to the physical, tangible world. It grounds us in reality.
Yeah.
Just like the astronauts coming back from the vacuum of space, hitting the ocean, and breathing real air.
Which brings our deep dive full circle to the anxiety of progress.
We are looking at a breathtaking, almost incomprehensible duality of humanity in April 2026. We are a species capable of extreme mathematical precision.
Unbelievable precision.
We can calculate the exact aerodynamic friction required to throw a metal capsule 4,000 miles around the dark side of the moon, skip it off the Earth's atmosphere like a stone on a pond, and drop it safely into the Pacific Ocean.
Right.
Yet we are fundamentally, viscerally terrified of the invisible mathematics we are inventing back home.
We have mastered the physics of the stars. We have mapped a combinatorial chaos of errors. But we have yet to master the psychology of our own creations. We are building gods, but we are still reacting like mortals.
So I want to leave you with a thought to mull over this weekend as you digest this briefing. If artificial intelligence can cleanly, elegantly solve the complex number theory problems that baffled the greatest human geniuses for half a century,
Right.
but simultaneously, the mere existence of that technology causes an entire generation of workers to intentionally sabotage their own livelihoods out of sheer panic, then computational power is no longer the bottleneck to the future.
No, it's not.
Our psychological resilience is. Will the ultimate limit of the AI age be the capability of the code or the human mind's ability to cope with it?
That is the question.
Subscribe to AI Unraveled on Apple Podcasts. To enjoy this weekend human interest briefing completely ads-free.
That concludes our weekend special for Saturday, April 11th. The signal for today is human resilience. We are living through an era of profound whiplash. In the exact same week that we successfully brought 4 humans back from the dark side of the moon, we also watched young people become so terrified of the future that they are actively sabotaging the software in their own offices. We are wrestling with cognitive dissonance, we are fighting for our digital sovereignty, and we are terrified of algorithms that can break into our banks. But if you look closely at the math being solved by DeepMind, or the bravery of the Artemis 2 crew, you are reminded that humanity is still the driving force behind all of this. Technology is just the amplifier. Make sure you are amplifying the right things. If you want to use AI on your own terms, stop listening to the hustle bros pushing useless prompt guides. Head over to djamgamine.com/toolkit for my AI executive toolkit. I've personally forensic vetted every platform on this list to make sure they meet our rigorous standards. No fluff, just a curated implementation stack with exclusive listener perks. This episode was made possible by djamgamine. Keep your weekend news human and completely ad-free by hitting subscribe on Apple Podcasts. I'm Etienne Newman. Stay human and keep unraveling the future. And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads, we build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit jamgamine.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building.